Now, Johnson & Johnson announced an initiative dubbed Champions of Science African Storytelling Challenge with aim to inspire more younger scientists and foster scientific innovation and advancements on the continent. I earlier spoke to Seema Kumar, who's the Vice President of Innovation, Global Health and Policy Communication at Johnson & Johnson to track this conversation. Take a look.
Johnson & Johnson has been in Africa for more than 86 years as a business, and then we also have a footprint here in global public health. But most recently, we also got involved in this new movement called Next Einstein Forum, because it's the aspiration that the next Einstein for the world is going to come from Africa. We all know that Africa is called the cradle of science and humanity, and so it was very inspiring for us to hear this vision when it was still an idea. Also, from an innovation perspective, we believe that great ideas can come from anywhere in the world, and by making the right connections across the globe, you can spur these ideas and create transformation for society. So we got involved from the ground up at the very beginning, and the first NEF global gathering was in Dakar. And now we have this second global gathering in Kigali under the presidency and the sponsorship of President Kagame. And also we and Robert Bosch Stiftung are solid partners in this.
How do we speed up the process from the process for innovation to the lab? Like, how can we speed up this process?
So I think the reason why youth are important is that we want to inspire young budding scientists into science careers by providing them inspiration, by providing role models, by making science be much more accessible, much more fun. And so what you saw today on the video, the Science Week video, showed how young kids who are doing robotics experiments, who are doing lab experiments, who are doing chemistry experiments, the joy in their faces when they discovered something. And so if we can inspire youth, and of course the millennials in Africa, which by far is 35% of Africa's population are millennials. And so I think that by inspiring them into science, we can create an environment that will facilitate progress. And today, President Kagame and President Macky Sall both spoke about the combination of government, academic, and industry partnership in sort of spurring that kind of innovation. And as they said, it's those kind of public-private partnerships that will spur innovation, entrepreneurship, and science.
Now, just tell me a little bit about one of your recent initiatives that you're working on, that is Champions of Science Storytelling Challenge. How is this, and what is the criteria like for the challenge?
Yeah, so we are launching the Champions of Science Africa Storytelling Challenge. And we're calling on all innovators and scientists in Africa to showcase their stories and to tell stories of what they have done, but also inspire others and the next generation into careers in science through storytelling. So submission criteria is really that you have to be a scientist, and you need to just have the name, the affiliation of your organization, what you're working on, and then submit a story. So we're going to be collecting all of the stories. At the end of the day, we will probably put all of the stories together. There will be a process and a committee that will look at the best stories, and there will be awards for that. But at the end of the day, every story that is a valid story that checks out will actually be all pulled together in some form of rich content. And as you know, NEF is all about showcasing science. And one of the things, the conversations that we had here, is that a lot of times outside of Africa, the stories of Africa, there is a stereotype of what that looks like, image-wise and story-wise. And so most of the time, the showcasing is of the problems, and so we want to balance that out with showcasing of the science and the innovation.
Which is very interesting as well. But now, another thing that I would like to speak about is now health, which is on the continent is not so much of a conversation that has been achieved. I mean, it's still underachieved, but much involvement and effort has been carried out to see that this actually can also be tackled. But now we're speaking about innovation. So how does innovation play a critical role in bettering the health sector or health services that we do receive on a day-to-day basis?
Innovation is key to solving global health problems. And so our model is using innovation, but also using the surround sound of healthcare system strengthening all together to make sure that we have an end-to-end solution to issues. But speaking of two innovations, I'll just give you two examples. One example is our treatment for multi-drug resistant tuberculosis, which we have been working with the Ministry of Health in South Africa to really make a big impact on MDR-TB in South Africa. And so that is a story of where an innovation has helped achieve a fabulous health outcome. Similarly, in HIV, we have multiple things going on in HIV. And especially in HIV, we just announced recently the start of clinical trials for an HIV vaccine, fingers crossed, in 2,600 women in South Africa. So we'll see what the results show. But again, a vaccine would be a phenomenal innovation if it can prevent HIV.
Last year in San Francisco, we did see a scientific journalists convention, I would call it, and you are carrying discussions around how now to better involve journalists in understanding science and our reporting on it and our trainings as far. But now you are looking forward to the Africa Media Academy, yeah, which is not yet set up. But what do you hope to achieve once this is in place?
Yeah, so last year when we were at the World Congress of Science Journalists, and by the way, I'm a science journalist by training, so I have a personal passion just like you for this topic. We had gathered, it was the largest gathering, and the first time it was happening in the United States, this World Congress. It's a World Congress. And we had a large contingent of African science journalists who sat down with a minister, Naledi Pandor, who at that time was the Minister of Science and Technology in South Africa, but also other leaders. And sitting there, we talked about what is required to create more training, more tools for African journalists to be able to cover science. Similarly, yesterday we spoke to a bunch of journalists here who had said that it's not just the science journalists, but it's the editors who need training, because editors think that what sells is controversy and politics, but that we underestimate how much the audience wants to hear of science and hope stories. And so by letting editors, educating editors about the power of science storytelling and why innovation and science is also a powerful story, the hope is that we'll have more coverage. So it's a combination of different things, and we're talking to both the World Congress of Science Journalists, but also AIMS and NEF to see how we can help further the dialogue in creating better, more training, more resources, more tools, and also education for editors to show that actually science stories can, with a lot of heart and science and ingenuity, you can actually create stories that will inform people, but also give them hope and have more people engaged in science, but also more students getting into science careers.